The detail that caught my attention this week wasn't even about romance. It was the word, approval. One constitutional expert on Spanish television casually mentioned that any future marriage involving Princess Leonor would carry institutional implications, and almost nobody reacted to it. But I did, because that single phrase completely changes the way you look at Leonor's future wedding. Suddenly this isn't just about love anymore, or headlines, or royal gossip. It becomes constitutional, and honestly, I don't think most people realize how serious that actually is. Because behind all the wedding rumors, behind the edits on TikTok, behind the future royal couple conversations, there's a hidden reality nobody talks about enough. The future Queen of Spain may not have complete freedom over the most personal decision of her life. Not fully. And once you understand the constitutional side of monarchy, you start seeing Leonor's public life very differently. If you're new to Leonor's story, subscribe. I post every day. Because I genuinely think people are focusing too much on who Leonor might marry, and not enough on what her marriage would actually represent for Spain itself. And honestly, that's where this story becomes fascinating. See, most modern audiences look at royal weddings emotionally. The dress, the kiss, the ceremony, the fantasy. But institutions don't see weddings emotionally first. They see stability, symbolism, continuity. That's the hidden layer behind royal marriages people often miss. And this is where Spain's monarchy becomes especially interesting right now. Because Leonor isn't just another royal princess. She's the direct future of the crown. Which means her future husband doesn't simply become a spouse. He becomes part of a constitutional image. That's a completely different level of pressure. And honestly, I think the palace has already started preparing the public psychologically for that reality without openly saying it. Watch how carefully Leonor's image has evolved recently. Less celebrity energy, more state presence, less personal narrative, more institutional symbolism. That's not accidental. And here's my hot take. I think Spain learned from watching other royal families become too emotionally driven in public. Look at Britain for example. While Prince William and Catherine project stability and continuity, the monarchy itself went through years of emotional turbulence publicly. Every family disagreement became international content. Every private issue became global analysis. Spain watched all of that very carefully, and I think they concluded something important. A monarchy survives longer when the institution always feels bigger than the individuals inside it. That's why Leonor's public life feels so controlled compared to celebrity culture. Because the palace isn't building an influencer. It's building constitutional trust. That's a huge difference. And honestly, once you understand that, the silence around Leonor's personal life suddenly makes perfect sense. Because the palace likely doesn't want the public emotionally attached to a specific romance too early. Why? Because if public expectations rise too fast and the relationship later collapses, the monarchy absorbs emotional damage too. That's the hidden cost of modern royal storytelling. And this is where social media changed everything. Years ago, royal institutions controlled narratives slowly through newspapers and television. Now, one viral clip can emotionally lock millions of people into a relationship narrative overnight. That's dangerous for constitutional systems built on stability. Imagine if Leonor became publicly attached to someone for years, and then the relationship failed dramatically under media pressure. It wouldn't just become tabloid gossip. It would become a national conversation about judgment, stability, and future leadership. That's why I think the palace moves much slower emotionally than the internet does. The internet wants instant fairy tales. Monarchies think in decades. And honestly, that clash is becoming more obvious around Leonor every month. Now here's where things get even deeper. A lot of people assume constitutional monarchy today is mostly symbolic. And legally, in many ways, yes. But symbolism itself is power. Massive power. That's why royal marriages still matter politically even in modern Europe. They create emotional continuity between generations. They reinforce legitimacy through public unity. And most importantly, they shape perception of national stability. That's why Leonor's future wedding won't simply be treated like a private event. It will become a national image project. And honestly, I think that's both fascinating and kind of sad at the same time. Because imagine growing up knowing your future marriage might carry constitutional expectations before it even carries personal happiness. That's an enormous emotional burden. And this is where I personally think Leonor's military training matters more than people realize. At first, many people thought the naval exercises and army appearances were just tradition. I disagree. I think the palace is building something much bigger: institutional credibility. They want Spain to see Leonor not as a celebrity princess, but as someone capable of carrying national responsibility. And here's the key: that image becomes incredibly important before any future marriage enters the conversation publicly. Because the stronger Leonor looks individually, the less the monarchy risks appearing dependent on whoever she eventually marries. That's strategic, very strategic, and honestly, smart. Because history shows monarchies become vulnerable when public fascination shifts too heavily toward the spouse instead of the heir. That imbalance creates tension inside institutions. Which is why I think Leonor's future husband will need to fit into the crown carefully, not overpower it. And this is where comparisons to Catherine become unavoidable again. Catherine strengthened the image of the British monarchy partly because she complemented institutional stability instead of competing with it. That balance matters enormously in royal systems. Meanwhile, relationships built around celebrity energy tend to create long-term instability. And honestly, I think Spain is terrified of that possibility. Not because they fear romance. Because they fear unpredictability. Huge difference. Which brings me back to the constitutional secret nobody explains properly online. The real issue isn't whether Leonor can marry for love. Technically, she can. The deeper issue is this: any relationship serious enough to approach marriage automatically becomes state-adjacent the moment it involves the future queen. That changes everything psychologically. Every background detail matters. Every family connection matters. Every public behavior matters. And honestly, that level of scrutiny would crush most ordinary relationships. That's why I think the palace values emotional discipline so highly around Leonor now. Not because they want her robotic, but because future constitutional stability depends heavily on public confidence in her judgment. And public confidence is fragile. Very fragile, especially in 2026, where attention spans are short but outrage cycles are endless. That's why Leonor's controlled public image actually makes more sense the deeper you analyze it. The palace isn't trying to make her mysterious. It's trying to make her dependable. And dependability is becoming incredibly valuable in modern leadership culture. Look at why figures like Prince William regained stronger public support recently. Stability suddenly became attractive again after years of chaos globally. People are exhausted, emotionally exhausted, so calm leadership photographs well now. And I think Spain sees Leonor as potentially representing exactly that kind of energy for the next generation. But here's the paradox: the more stable and institutional her image becomes, the harder it may become for the public to imagine her having an ordinary personal life. That's the trade-off monarchy quietly creates. And honestly, I wonder if Leonor thinks about that privately sometimes. Like, does she ever look at ordinary couples and realize they have freedoms she'll never fully experience? Normal dating, normal mistakes, normal privacy. Those things disappear when your future wedding becomes tied to constitutional symbolism. And I think that's the hidden emotional cost behind royal life people rarely talk about honestly. The crown gives privilege, but it also negotiates away spontaneity. That's why I believe Leonor's future wedding will eventually become one of the most carefully managed royal transitions Europe has seen in years. Not because Spain wants spectacle, but because the monarchy understands something modern audiences often forget. Royal weddings are never just personal milestones. They are institutional messaging events. Every detail communicates stability, continuity, and future direction whether people consciously notice it or not. And the more I watch how carefully Leonor is being positioned publicly right now, the more convinced I become that the palace is already thinking about that future far earlier than the public realizes. Not emotionally, strategically, because monarchies survive by preparing transitions long before ordinary people notice them happening. And honestly, that may be the real constitutional secret behind Princess Leonor's future wedding.